We go. Amazing. So yeah, hello everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. As Rory said, first webinar here at the Neuroverse. I'm Maggie, the founder. I have a background in HR and also an executive coach. And this is our lead coach, Neil. You want to introduce yourself as well?
So I'm Neil Lawrence. I work most of the time with HR, with leaders, and with neurodivergent professionals, and helping them complete tasks that either get left over or life stages stuff that they want to get done, and also help with confidence.
Amazing. So today, if you have any questions at all, feel free to raise your hand or just whack it in the chat box and we'll try and get to you as soon as we can. But there will be some time at the end to ask questions. We shouldn't be the full hour and a half, I think about an hour and 10. Obviously it's the end of the day. We don't want to keep you all too late. So yeah, today we will be going through obviously our first neurodiversity in the workplace webinar. We're going to look at what is neurodiversity. We're going to look at how it manifests at work. We're going to look at some of the challenges, some of the benefits, and why it's important for businesses to support it and how you can support it as well. So we're going to give you some actionable steps that you guys can take away instantly, which will be good. This is want to work. Obviously left some more time for technical errors as well. So you will notice that on our slide, bar this one, they are all going to be quite bare. Not too much information, quite a lot of images, and that's because if you don't already know that people all process information in different ways, and we kind of like to leave our slides open and so that people can process our visual aids and also kind of just listen to how we talk. I can get a little bit stressed out when slides look a little bit like this. I think Neil can too. So yeah, we're gonna keep them nice and basic and go from there. So our outcomes for today, we're going to define neurodiversity and its impact in the workplace. So that's going to give us clear understanding of what neurodiversity is and explore how neurodivergent traits can influence individuals' experiences and performance in the workplace. We're going to identify key challenges faced by neurodivergent employees. So we're going to learn about the common challenges they face in the workplace, including maybe communication, sensory sensitivities, and navigating workplace culture. We're going to recognize strengths of neurodivergent individuals, so see how this contributes to teams, such as creativity, problem solving, attention to detail, everything like that. And we're going to look at actionable tips and strategies to create a more inclusive environment so that neurodivergent employees can feel supported and are able to thrive in the workplace. So yeah, first of all, we're going to look at what is neurodiversity. So neurodiversity explains the rich difference of all human brains, and this is made up by everybody's experiences. So everybody in the world kind of is part of neurodiversity, and the way they view the world will be impacted by their upbringing, their professional experiences, their personal experiences, their culture, everything like this. So that all will impact how they view the world. And so that all impacts neurodiversity. And what we're going to be focusing on today is neurodivergence. And this explains how different brain types can have specific traits, which means they process, interact, and behave with the world differently to those who are neurotypical, quote unquote. So that means people with ADHD, autism, ADHD, which is ADHD and autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, everything under that umbrella. So yeah, we've got a quick video here as well, which explains neurodiversity in a little bit more detail. So I'll give that a go and see what you guys think. See if you can hear it as well. Can you hear that, Neil?
No.
Oh, can you not?
No. This always happens, doesn't it?
That is annoying because it worked last time we played
I know,
it.
I know. It's the Zoom. It's the curse of Zoom.
Oh no, things never work. Is there a button that I need to press? Oh, I'm not sure. We might have to skip this amazing video that Inigo has made for us. Okay, well, we're just going to have to move on, unfortunately. But basically, it explains what neurodiversity is all has different people who are neurodivergent have different perspectives. And just because you have a group of ADHD people, it doesn't mean that everyone who's ADHD is going to have the same experiences. So, Neil, do you want to kind of explain a little bit as to what neurodiversity means to you and kind of your experiences with it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple of things for me. First of all, I am very aware every time, particularly I'm on business platforms, just how I think about 90% of what's on there, the word is misused. I'm not usually one for being picky with words, but I love the word neurodiversity because then it's about everybody's brain patterns, including people who are neurodivergent. But then it's much easier to kind of get a wider idea of the fact that every brain type is different, even if it falls within like a neurodivergent pattern. So I'm dyscalculic, which is really hard to say. Some people tell me that's not even the right way to pronounce it. I'm not even sure I could spell it. But what that means is I've got dyslexia for maths. It also means I have difficulty with organizing myself, with sequencing, and sometimes my words get stuck in my head and I have to wait an extra 10 seconds before they come out and possibly might not be in the right order. So those are the typical things that's the way my brain works, and knowing how to feed the best of that makes me much more effective in the work I do and happier as a human being.
Amazing. So yeah, similar to Neil, I am dyslexic and dyspraxic, maybe a couple of other things sprinkled in there as well. And yeah, this makes it a bit more difficult for me for kind of reading, writing, spelling, remembering dates, names, faces, organizing, kind of things like that. I think in the past 2 weeks I've been late, early, missed a couple of appointments, one by a week. So that's just a couple of the day-to-day struggles. But on the back end of that, it also means that I have a really good kind of like holistic thinking, like looking at the big picture. I think I'm quite creative, good problem solver. Yeah, my emotional intelligence can be quite high, which can be a blessing and a curse at times. But yeah, so there's kind of just a little bit of an idea of, two neurodivergent people, very different, I guess, views and kind of ways that we're interacting with the world, and it'll be the same for everybody else. So I guess when you're meeting somebody who's neurodivergent, it's always good to, ask questions, be curious. I'm sure that kind of the way that you can support them and help them will be different kind of from person to person. I'm going to be upset about that video later and move on. So yeah, now Neil's going to talk to us a little bit about how neurodiversity can impact the workplace. Yes, I will let you go, Neil.
Yeah, so we're going to break this down into two sections. First of all, when it goes wrong, and then some of the signs for individuals who are living within that. And just point out before I do all of that, that thinking about organisation, for example, which is what I was talking about before, I've got a great system that overrides what my brain would do naturally through years of practice, and so it is possible as well to build a whole set of skills that mean that you can show up and do things that your brain kind of finds a bit difficult. Okay, so when it goes wrong in the workplace, there's a couple of things that we see. We see silo thinking. We see an inability to negotiate. We can see poor outcomes and spiraling self-esteem. And all of these things feeding into a loop that makes for, I guess, an unstable feeling environment. And then that can also lead to a kind of tribal mentality. Things are lots of in the news and on social media platforms at the moment of, I'm experiencing this. This is what I need. These are the people who like me. I am more needy than that person. We are more needy than them. It's who deserves the prize or who deserves to get the most attention because of it. So everything turns into an us and them, and certainly when it comes to neurodivergent, I guess other bigger pictures in terms of ED and I know you're going to mention that later, Maggie, but that's kind of what we're seeing is that this sort of who's fighting for the scraps because they can be scraps kind of takes off, which is a really unhealthy place to be. So the question that's always in the air that maybe isn't talked about is who's responsible in a situation like that? And again, in some organisations, it goes round. It's the individuals who's neurodivergent. It's their responsibility. It's the manager's responsibility. It's the organisation, HR's responsibility. You know, it can go round in a loop. It's see, dyslexic moment. Okay, so that's not going to come back to me. But you know, it's an outside body's responsibility to come in and make sure that things are put in place, are reasonably adjusted for, in inverted commas, which is a phrase I absolutely dislike. So I think the answer is it's all about co-creation, which is something that people really find difficult at the moment, particularly, and that is that for the people in the organisation to be able to talk to those people who are neurodivergent, and like Maggie was saying, understand what their experience of that is. So it's not entitlement. It's not I need this. It's how are we going to work together to ensure that the work needs to get done, and that it's done in a way that can make that person feel confident and benefit the company.
Amazing. We're going to the next slide.
Yeah. So stop. Kind of think. Just ending with that. I think in a way that the outcome of that would be neurodiversity, as we've talked about at the start, because you would have everybody's brain patterns feeding into a workspace that feels inclusive and safe. So I was going to go on to talk about psychological safety. Do you want me to come back to that, Maggie? And
come back to it. You can say it now. It's completely up to you.
Okay, so
we've obviously got a bit of it later on, so maybe touch on it.
Yeah. So later on, we're going to be talking about how to build a more psychologically safe workplace. But just for the moment, the signs that you might see in a workspace where neurodivergent people don't feel psychologically safe are anxiety, muddled thinking, an increase in inflexibility of no, I need to do it like this. That they are getting a louder self-narrative, so they might appear more negative about themselves more, and then some of the more sinister area of it, depression. People can get depressed. That can lead to absenteeism. That can lead to physical illness. People's immune system weakening sometimes, and at the very, very severe end of it, and there's research being done shown that this happens with neurodivergent people that aren't feeling supported or feel isolated, self-harm, and even suicidal thoughts. So that is another reason why being kind of building a psychologically safe environment is really, really important. However, when it's supported, there are lots of things that are incredible that can happen as a result. So if the company and the organisation are speaking to their staff and they're designing a neurodiverse community, that's when innovation and creativity that Maggie was talking about before can really, really come to the fore. And that leads to productivity being increased because there's less resistance and people are working with each other, and the spaces that are open and inclusive, and that's in terms of the culture of the company, physical nature of the company, the policies also support what's going on, and that drives the process. So everything's involved with each other, if you like. So I've got a couple of ideas that you could take away. If we have more time, we do them now. But here's ways of getting into that and starting that process for where you work. Could be like this. So grab some post-it notes. You can write down just the improvement points that kind of come into your head immediately. Then spread them out on a table. If you want to be quite creative and playful with it, get some sugar paper, get some colored pens, and really try to draw out what a neurodiverse workspace would look like. And then just write down a list of a plan, I suppose, for how some of those changes can be put in place. Finally, just rank those post-it notes in order of what you think needs to be done first and what needs to be done last. And then ask yourself the question, how can I get my organisation into this? What is it I need to do next? So that's really about helping guiding leaders into creating inclusive environments. And also things like using digital communication in a positive way can really make a difference, and increasing accessibility for neurodivergent people can really, really help. So typical examples of what can make the big difference: flexible working arrangements, environmentally making adjustments. It can be the language that is used. Talked about reasonable adjustment before, ignoring the word, but the actual process of it. That can really help. I still can't remember the name of it. I love the way that the neurodivergent brain works sometimes. Occupational health, there it is. Thank you very much. That took 5 minutes, you saw it. Culture, and just having some action points that are very specific to your organisation. So it's none of this generic off the peg stuff that there's lots about at the moment. Okay, and being non-judgmental and leading in with a highly visible amount of accountability on the issue.
Amazing.
I got it all in. Yeah.
We finished? Okay. So now we're going to look onto why businesses should support neurodiversity. And this is kind of going to be your case to be able to bring to CEOs, SLT, kind of like any of the actual change makers in your organization as to why they should invest, time, money, anything really to support neurodiversity. So the first one, which I won't touch on too long because I feel like it would be a bit offensive to talk at you for it, is moral imperative. So doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Obviously, we're all people in the world that have experienced hardship and not so hardship. So kind of making people's life as easy as possible so that they can do the best that they can do in a professional working environment. Because it's the right thing to do. And then Neil's going to touch on social trends.
Okay, you're going to have to keep me short on this one, Maggie. I've already been revved up on this issue this morning.
Okay.
So, you know, because you've been hearing quite a lot of it. So, just some thoughts about the context of the environment, the working environment we're working in. Because I think a lot of the time people are acting like we're just carrying on regardless. We are in a very specific period of history at the moment, economically, politically, obviously, and globally. So ignoring that when you're at work with everything else that's going on kind of is counterproductive. I call it the white elephants. So I'm thinking particularly at the moment there's pushback against, I honestly feel about Gen Z one more time I might actually cry into my soup. I've worked with, I was a teacher before, a coach, so so-called Gen Z people of the age group of people I've spent a lot of time with and still do, the connections I've got, and the young professionals that I work with in different workplaces too, and the problems that I support privately, particularly neurodivergent ones. And so when you've got people like the JP Morgan boss saying, I've had it with Gen Z, that's really, really unhelpful. And I saw as well a couple of days ago, there's a report that's come out about Gen Z workers in the NHS saying that over half of them have experienced sickness or been off with sickness. The word snowflake, which actually abhor, has been in existence culturally for about 20 years. So this is something in terms of the mindset of the country has been coming on for a long, long time. So there's that. There's this social media impact, way that we often talk to each other in very binary ways, and we arrive at the judgment that's been decided on, and the ability to negotiate has severely been eroded by the way that we interact or don't interact. And if people are telling you that what's going on now, it's not. If you look back, I watched a couple of films quite recently. It really reminded me that the experience of the world in the 90s and the early noughties, all of these things that we're seeing now as real crisis points were in erosion then. The idea of using your head and not connecting emotionally with people around you, that's been around for that time. Professionalism, meaning not thinking about the needs of people, just going on and making a decision. Add to that, obviously, COVID, my mother calls it, I don't know quite why. Also, the trauma that's kind of been resultant with things like lockdown, the increased fear, the suspicion of others that often in interaction with it on LinkedIn all the time, what you're going to do to me is how people often respond when talking to them, which I think might be connected to that fear during lockdown. If I speak to this person, they might infect me, literally. So I think there's something that's kind of been kept with us. We micromanage everything, including our thoughts, our time, our sleep patterns. There's no part of our lives that we don't try and control. And I think it's actually making us. So that's the context we're working in. That's not happy news, but I think that's where we're at. Was that
Okay.
too long a rant, Maggie?
Oh no, that was a perfect length rant. Don't worry about it. And then finally, obviously, there are other reasons as well as to why you should support neurodiversity in the workplace, but these are just the three that we're highlighting. But the final one is competitive advantage. I think it's important first to maybe, obviously, Neil's kind of touched on some of the social trends, but to have a look a little bit at what's going on in the rest of the world. Obviously, you have Trump, who is putting all of his diversity workers on paid leave and trying to make schools kind of cancel their ED&I policies. And I know that he's really honing in on Apple at the moment, which I saw this morning, to try and get them to go back on their ED&I because they just said on Tuesday that they're not going to get rid of it. And then you have you have more companies such as, Toyota and Ford, who are all kind of cancelling their ED&I initiatives. But it's important to kind of see the other side of that. I feel like that media is so shoved in our face, and it can make people think, oh, is ED&I strategy the right thing to do? Should I be focusing time on this? If everybody's kind of going back on themselves, why should I kind of take time to improve ours? And yeah, it's important to think that to know that there's a lot of other organizations that are still that still know how important it is. So Apple, as I said, have reinstated their ED&I on Tuesday, and I know that Coca-Cola have as well, not on Tuesday, but just in general. And that's because there is so many benefits and kind of the need for it to be supported. And when making these ED&I strategies, which I think Trump is he's using a good stance against ED&I because of the focus that has been seen about positive discrimination. And this is where people are promoted or they're given roles because of a particular characteristic or trait, which is obviously still illegal, obviously still discrimination. And what we need to focus on is this positive action, which is about putting things in place to make the playing field more equal, to get in candidates that are from these diverse backgrounds and to be able to kind of get them into your organization. And when you've got them in your organization, to actually help them thrive and grow in the best way possible. So yeah, that focus on positive action over positive discrimination. But yeah, why should we do this in general, other than the moral reasons, other than the social reasons? We have competitive advantage, as we know, as I'm sure everybody knows, that there's been statistics over statistics about how diverse teams are constantly outperforming their non-diverse counterparts in terms of profit, productivity, kind of all that good stuff that you really need in a team. So it makes sense to try and invest where you can to kind of get these benefits. Employee morale. Because when you kind of create these inclusive environments, you're creating a culture which values people, it values their opinions, it values their ways of working, it values their time, and it kind of working in organizations that have that culture of inclusivity, of equality, of diversity are going to make people feel more happy to be at work. They're going to feel more valued, and that's going to make them work harder, work for you longer. You'll have higher retention rates. And you'll have employees that are actually proud to work with you and proud to be your employee, and then they're just going to be ambassadors for you whilst they're working for you and even when they leave. Just because people leave the organization, you don't want it to be like, oh, well, they've left. That doesn't matter. You want them to leave with fond memories so that they can be advocates for you kind of moving forward. Along with this, you have a broader market appeal, kind of touching on those social trends again. Gen Z, millennials, everybody, I think, because social media as well, has been a lot more opinionated and have very strong views about what they want, and they're not afraid to tell people about it. They're not afraid to leave. They're not afraid to tell their friends, tell their followers, whatever it is. So when you are an employer who is actively seeking out diverse workforce, actively aligning with people's values, actively doing things that promote, ED&I, CSR, kind of all like social justice in general, you're going to appeal to a broader set of candidates than you would if you don't have these values. People want to work a place that makes them proud to work there. They want to work with something that aligns with their values. So kind of investing in neurodiversity and ED&I in general is going to allow more people to view your company as somewhere that they want to work. And because of this, you're going to have an enhanced talent pool, So when you are recruiting for roles, you're going to have people that are better quality candidates, that are more aligned with your business strategy and your business culture. You're going to have people that will thrive in their roles, that want to stay in their roles, and kind of having a more diverse candidate pool has got nothing but benefits really. So yeah, moving on. So now you've got your broader market appeal, you've got your enhanced talent pool. So now you've got the very best people in your organization, hopefully. Now you can reap the benefits of what that means for your workforce. You're going to have a higher productivity, you're going to have more innovation and more creativity. This is because people who are neurodivergent, as we said earlier, they have different ways of seeing the world, different ways of thinking, even neurodiversity in general. Everybody's got their own view of how to do things. So when you think about it, if you have a team that everybody thinks a little bit differently and everybody sees the world just a little bit like everybody sees the world not the same, you're going to have a team that is more creative, that can problem solve better, that can troubleshoot better, that can kind of see the things that not everybody else is seeing. They might see a new way to market a product, or more a new way to kind of like penetrate a market. Do you know what I mean? So all of these things that you just think, oh, but it's just, it's just diversity, just bringing more people into the organization. It's not just bringing more people into the organization that has to kind of like hit those diversity figures, but it's also to like support your whole organizational strategy, to support your productivity, to support your profit margins, to support your bottom lines, all of these things that all organizations want, right? And then I guess zooming out completely, company branding, really similar to our kind of our market appeal. But people want to spend money, they want to kind of work with organizations that again align with their values, that again kind of have those CSR, ED&I kind of, they want to put money into things that's going to make them feel good about it. So if you're here advocating for diversity, advocating for neurodiversity, activating, brain fart now. But if you're just showcasing yourself as an employer that is doing the right things and that is really advocating for their CSR, social justice, ND, ED&I, then people are going to be more likely to work with you. You're going to be able to use that as a marketing tool in itself, just because you can put it on your website, you can put it on LinkedIn, you can put it on social media, and that's going to be like, oh, I want to work with that company because they're doing the right things. They're actually doing something that makes a difference instead of just selling me stuff. So yeah, all of these great things that you get from having a more neurodiverse and just diverse workforce in general. So next we're going to look at how can businesses support neurodiverse teams. And for here, I'm going to pass over to Neil.
Yeah, thank you for that, Maggie. So I'm really going to come back to this psychological safety piece for this. And like I said earlier, this is kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about before. So this is about how to prevent some of those symptoms that we discussed earlier from coming to be. And I think underneath it all is the biggest shock tactic that it could ever be thought of. And that is, remember, you're talking to a human. I don't really patronising the way I just said that, but actually getting caught up in the workday, particularly if we've got to make like decisions around bottom line or changes or transitions, in which I'm seeing many companies having to be very agile and do lots of changes over the last 3 or 4 years, sometimes more than one a year. That kind of change in midstream, remembering that human beings are the center of this, and when you're having those conversations, they need to be couched in those terms. Really, really helpful in terms of building psychological safety. And the person with that job title, whatever their personality is like, or you think their personality is like, they are a person. So there is something beyond what they're doing that's really important. So making a connection. Can't think of anything that's more off trend at the moment than saying that. We live our whole lives in our heads, and I'll be talking more about this towards the end. We talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about connection, and that's kind of where it ends. Actually, and some people even have scripts prepared that they go, I'm going to go and say this today to my team because that's going to make them feel that I'm more a human. Well, you know what? Just go in and be a human. Scary thought, but that's actually what makes the hugest difference of all. Also, there's some little tips that are to be aware of. So we know what physical labour is, what mental labour is, but there's emotional labour as well. Standing up every day to do a job requires that we can stay and do that no matter whatever else is going on in our lives. So that can be difficult if we've got quite a lot of home stuff going on, or we've got a bad brain fog day. Just had a brain fog moment there. I've also got fibromyalgia that's feeding into that. Then those things can really impact. So making space in our lives so that we can emotionally recover, just like we might physically recover, or just mentally take a break, is also really, really important, and makes a huge difference how resilient people can feel on an everyday. Maggie, if I'm going on too long, let me know, by the way.
No, keep going, keep going.
Okay, so I think some ways of doing that are, when we're meeting the person behind the role, decouple judgment from the critique of what we might be thinking about whatever decision they're making. And particularly, I'm thinking here about performance, I suppose, and managers or other team members that are having to work with someone else or needing to work with someone else around enhancing performance on a day-to-day basis. There's something that's not being met, the standards that need to improve or get better. Really thinking about how to do that. A really interesting conversation with Maggie yesterday. A lot of the companies that I work in, when they're talking about putting something in place to help someone develop their career, they use the word HIP. I've not thought about what the word improvement plan mean. I've got beef with the word improvement when it comes to self improvement, because that makes me feel like all of us aren't good enough. I hadn't thought about it from the work perspective. So Maggie was talking to me about having the word develop, instead of the word improvement. So you've got a personal development plan, and not couching that in terms of, if you don't do this, you're not going to be here, but actually just using that as part of the every single week by week one-to-one line management meeting, if you like, in order to really support someone through those stages. So it's more of a coaching style and less of a, I'm here and you need to do this. Also, crucially, ask people what they need. We constantly assume someone might need, especially in neurodivergent. I've read all about ADHD now, so I'm going to know everything about you. Well, no, you're not. So actually opening and asking people what it is they need, and opening up that dialogue, can make a huge difference to psychological safety. And make it safe for other people to give feedback as well. That doesn't mean they can call you all kinds of names under the sun, but it is, if you can model how to give feedback safely, other people they can actually let you know what it is they need to be a better place performance-wise, and to make the support meaningful. Again, from a moral, from ethical, from a human point of view, you're doing it because it's a human being who deserves support, and it's not just an big box gesture. I think I'm done.
Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to touch on is sustainably inclusive environments. And this is about being able to create an environment within the workplace that's going to allow for inclusivity in the long haul. It's not just that you're having a one-off training session, or you're going to put in a tokenistic policy that's going to make the world a difference, because it probably won't. You need to kind of have these practices embedded throughout the employee life cycle so that they can continue to work kind of like unconsciously. You don't want to be throwing kind of like diversity in people's faces, because people get bored, people kind of don't really know how to talk about it all the time. So if you can just create it within your processes, within your practices, it's going to make it a hell of a lot easier to be sustainable. People are going to be much more inclined to do it because it doesn't seem like an add-on, it's kind of embedded within it. Kind of think about it as, instead of having neurodiversity support as your side of fries with your meal, instead it's an intricate part of the ingredients within the main dish. That's what I like to call it. So to do this, I have developed quite a simple framework which touches on 6 points that you can use to embed it throughout your organization. I'm not going to go too much into this because I could probably talk for a while, and I don't want to do that on the end of the day on a Thursday, and this probably will be its own webinar. But yeah, so I call this the 6 phases of neurodiversity, and the first point is neurodiversity itself, and this is about getting a neurodiverse workforce within your organization. So this is all about the recruitment stage, and through here you look at how do you how do you attract, and how do you recruit your candidates. Is your job description written in a way that is clear and concise and not jargon heavy and going to confuse people? Do you have kind of different ways that people can apply? Is it fully, do you kind of have a really long application process, or do you let people put in their own CVs? Do you have a lot of assessments that are kind of unnecessary? For example, if you have a role that you're recruiting for a, I don't know, an operations manager, and within this initial application phase, you have 3 assessments based on, how do people use verbs? I don't even know what a verb is, to be honest. Is this word written in is this sentence written in the most concise way, and kind of like, I don't know, things around communication that you don't really need, but it's kind of a way for you to cut your candidate pool in half. Assessments like this are very contradictory to be able to attract neurodivergent employees, because if I saw that I had to do these assessments, I just wouldn't apply at all because I know that I wouldn't get through. But then you might be missing out on some amazing candidates. So kind of just really looking at your recruitment process and seeing, is this making it really easy for people to apply? Am I really focusing on the right skills and abilities that I need? And yeah, just that way you're able to kind of get in that diverse talent pool that we were talking about before. Again, it's about positive action, not positive discrimination. And then once you have these people in your organization, it's all about inclusion, and inclusion is making people feel included. So this is focusing on your working environment and also communication. So first, talking about working environment, it's about kind of, what are your workspaces? Are you allowing flexible working? Are you allowing hybrid working? Do you have, if you're in the office, do you have kind of quiet spaces that people can go? Do you offer noise cancelling headphones? When you have meetings, can people kind of walk out and come back in and have a little bit of like a then moment to reconfigure? Kind of all of these things are going to make people feel more productive, feel more valued, more included, because you're kind of allowing them the space to be themselves so that they can show up in the best way for work. And then on the other side of that is communication. So it's kind of, how do you communicate with the rest of your organization, with the rest of your teams? Do you give all of your organizational information in a long newsletter once a month that people have to kind of trawl through and find the key bits of information? Or are you kind of giving them in short bursts? Are you kind of having a lot of team meetings? Are you having kind of big meetings, small meetings? Do you have a lot of emails? Kind of just working through what communication works for the organization. This might have to be multiple forms of communication because not everyone communicates the same, and just making sure that all the information is given in like an easy, accessible format. And then we move on to equality, and this is about leveling the playing field. So this means that you might have to offer some training, some support, maybe some coaching, maybe some mentoring for individuals so that they have the same kind of information, the same skills that everybody else has, so that they can thrive in their role. So you might offer some tech training for a specific system, or you might offer some accountancy training for people that need some extra accountancy support. You might offer specific coaching for individuals who are neurodivergent and they want some help to work out how they can work better, because not everybody's going to know when you ask them. For example, say somebody's just been recently diagnosed with ADHD. Just because they've now been given this ADHD diagnosis does not mean that they've been given the keys as to how they can perform in the best way possible. Sorry, I'm just admitting people into the webinar. So they might need some coaching or some mentoring so they can learn ways to work better, smarter, and harder, and everything like that. So then we move on to leadership, and this is about making your managers into leaders. So you want people that embody the values of ED&I, of neurodiversity, and have these characteristics to be real advocates for what is that you're trying to achieve. Anybody can be a manager and kind of manage their team, but it really takes a leader to be able to know what people need, to spot some warning signs if people aren't doing so well, and to have these conversations and to be able to influence others. And this doesn't mean that you can just pick people and they'll automatically have these skills. To be able to kind of see the signposts for somebody who's struggling with neurodiversity, for neurodivergence, for example, takes time, and it can be hard for people to have these conversations. So it's all about, again, training, coaching, mentoring your leaders to be able to feel confident in having these conversations. And then moving on, we have culture, and this is about creating a culture of openness, kind of like honesty, communication, trustworthiness, so that people feel comfortable coming to HR, coming to their manager, coming to the organization when they need support. If an employee doesn't feel safe enough, again, we're touching on the psychological safety, if they don't feel safe enough to disclose their neurodivergence, it is not on them to feel bad that they have failed to disclose. Because if they were in an organization that's culture kind of really made them feel safe and value, that kind of disclosing of that personal information would be a lot easier. So you really need to look at, do my employees feel safe? And if they don't, why don't they feel safe? And how can we kind of support this? And then, yeah, the final part is mechanics. So this is all about the more technical behind the scenes side. So the HR processes, the operational walkthroughs, the how do we do our jobs? How are we managing people? How are we doing our performance management processes? Like, is everything done in the right way that it's going to be able to support our neurodiverse workforce? For example, if I pick out performance management, kind of looking at what is it that we are measuring our employees on? Is it their timekeeping skills? Is it their, I don't know, timekeeping skills is like the easy one to do. Is it their timekeeping skills? Is it their ability to complete work quickly? Or is it that we're measuring them on their creativity, their innovation, their ability to problem solve when everything goes wrong? Or like, we're focusing on these more binary skills that we've just been, I guess, trained to always think are good? Or are we looking more externally to be like, okay, how do people's brains work? What's actually really beneficial in the workplace? And I feel like when you look at it like that, you're going to get a wider scope of traits. You're going to look at creativity, you can look at innovation, and this is when you can be really fair in how you kind of manage people's performance, because it's more aligned with the holistic neurodiversity instead of just like a neurotypical view. I feel like I tried to do that quickly, but I might not have done. But yeah, so that is how I would start to create a sustainably inclusive environment. Yeah, it's probably like a lot more work goes into that than just the 10 minutes I've spewed at everybody. But yeah, if we move on now to Neil's open communication.
Yeah, so this is picking up from some of the stuff we were just talking about before in terms of psychologically safe place. And I'm going to lean into particularly the work on Nancy Klein, who's created a set of questions that can be asked in any meeting or interaction that can open the space for a non-judgmental, thoughtful, reflective space where everybody can think as opposed to feel loaded or on the spot. But more about that in a minute. So first of all, keeping a moral compass there. And by that, I don't mean judging people. I mean that our actions or words, we're thinking about the impact they can have on other people. I think also being genuine and not just going with a pack decision sometimes can really. I think real mindfulness. Hopefully, we'll have a bit of time for that as well. Not just the off-the-shelf stuff that's being sold and ticked, but really being able to be in the moment with people. Again, more about that later. Listening deeply and being kind. That's a word that I use a lot. Not a very sexy word in terms of webinars and how we think about connections with people, but actually kindness in its genuine form to ourselves first of all, because the world around us is pushing us harder and harder and harder and faster. And if we're not doing that, we can't do it for other people. And if your idea of self example is something that's on I have to do this list that you then kick yourself for later in the day because you didn't do your 10 minutes of mindfulness or your 10 minutes that you've allowed yourself to sit, then that no. So it's a very specific way of doing it and keeping all of the workplace in mind, not just your team, but you and your manager, not just the impact you have on somebody, but how one action or one interaction can affect everything around you as well. So that, yes, that's the neurodivergence, but I also hope that's a more neurodiverse, so a more helpful, I suppose, consultancy kind of thinking around it. So Nancy Klein, back to her. So this is what she came up with, a very bad version of it, so I really shouldn't be quoting her because she'd probably be kicking my bum from here to right off the screen. But something like this. You set something up, everybody, so whatever the issue is, whatever the conversation's going to be, everybody takes a turn. And we stick to the reality of what's being talked about, not what you're feeling or what you think you're seeing, the facts of the situation. That while people are talking and while you are talking, you're identifying assumptions that are being made. Because we skip steps all the time in terms of communication. And we don't even know we're doing it. So again, this is not criticizing, it's just opening the space that we can start aware of it. It can be quite playful. I'll be saying, oh, yeah, bum, I just did that again, or when you said this, actually, maybe this, just having some space where you can do that and asking insightful questions, not reactive questions. Questions are going to raise what it is you're talking about. And when everyone's having going around, ask everyone again. Is there anything else you want to add? Obviously, not staring them out and making them feel awful, put them on the spot, but just offering a bit of time for somebody to be able to add some value or have some more time to reflect and think. Give people permission to tell the truth. Doesn't mean to be rude. Like, I've been sitting next to you in these meetings for 4 years. When are you going to use deodorant? That's not okay. But something about actually when we have these conversations, I sometimes think we miss this, or I think we should be doing this. Just allowing people to have the truth of their experience and people's feelings. To be really clear about that. Again, not acting out on those feelings. But if a particular issue is making someone angry, they should have the right to sit and go, actually, this kind of makes me angry because of this, or this kind of makes me upset because of this. Kind of makes me happy because of this. Not just give it to the negative. Because also people are telling you what goes right and what they like, then that also cues you in to a more inclusive and thriving neurodiverse workforce anyway. And ending with a positive turn. Now, this is not toxic positivity, plenty of that. Wherever we go, it's not stretching that smile, actually want to punch a wall and forcing everyone to say something nice. Have you been in one of those? But, there's ones that they usually like games for team building, and people are forced to understand each other, know and then say what it is they really love about that person. I mean, at the best, they can work really, really well. I've had really powerful experiences from that, particularly with the manager I didn't get on with. And actually, the moment where we had to do that, we were fine after that. It was really cool. But I think in general, they can feel very, very forced. It's not that. It's genuinely going around and saying what you appreciate about something in the room. And there's a lot of work to do to turn it into a more functional space for a team. That's fine. There will always be something. Other ways is a bigger team. It's not just 2 people, divided into pairs. So there's lots of things there, and following that technique and getting used to everyone getting used to using that kind of.
Amazing. Is that everything, Neil? Do I dare move on?
I think you can move on
Amazing.
unless you're aggressively telling me that I have this
No, that all sounded great to me. Okay, well now unfortunately I've got a bit of a less exciting topic, but a very necessary one. is tracking measures, tracking metrics even. So if you're making all these changes in your organization, you kind of want to show something for it other than like, I think the vibe's gotten better. Like, oh, I'm pretty sure people are improving in their productivity. Because if you're in, like if you're kind of committing a lot of time, maybe some money into it, like kind of the senior leaders, they're going to want to know that, and you're going to want to know as well that you're doing the right thing, going in the right direction, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to just go over a couple of tracking metrics that you can use within various different parts of the organization that you can kind of see, are things going the right way? Has it made a difference? All that kind of stuff. So starting with recruitment and onboarding, a great way to see if you are actually getting that more diverse candidate pool is to do some metrics in terms of like tracking demographics that you have coming in, and that could just be with a diversity survey at the end. It could be kind of having some questions within the application form. But I think it's really important to kind of have your wording right about this. I saw a video a couple of weeks ago where somebody was saying, why do I need to put in my like all of my demographic, well, it didn't say demographic, but all of my information when I'm kind of recruiting for a job? Like, why should that impact how I get the job? Like, kind of feeling a little bit hard done by. And I can see that if you don't understand why people are like kind of tracking this information, you might be a little bit confused, a little bit suspicious. So kind of making it clear that, you know, this information that you're gathering is confidential. It's not attached to your job application form. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're trying to improve, and it's not because of XYZ. Just being like super clear about it. And hopefully when you kind of have this messaging and you are, you know, you have your company values and you're shown as an organization that does good for the right reasons, you will get people filling in this information without the fear that it's going to impact their um, hiring process. And then you can kind of see, okay, before I made all these changes to my recruitment process or whatever it is, then we had X amount of people within our candidate pool. But now I've made these changes. Now I've made the job description better, and I've used this different font, and I've given people all this information before and all this kind of stuff. Now our candidate pool has gotten to this, and we've got this level of neurodiversity or just diversity in general. You can track it whichever way you like. And that can be a really clear kind of like cut way of, here we were, we were here, now we're here. And that's all because of the changes that you've made. You can also do kind of recruitment satisfaction surveys afterwards. This might be a little bit harder if you've rejected somebody and then you're trying to get feedback. So if anything, when you have these new hires come in, do ask them, how was the recruitment process? Was there anything that was a little bit dodgy? Did you think that, well, like, were you able to ask for support when needed? Kind of just, you know, continuous improvement, feedback, and implement any feedback that you get, basically. And then we go to employee engagement metrics. So we go through engagement surveys, inclusivity surveys. You could do working groups depending on how big your organization is, and get the feedback from that, and then kind of compare this data from, you know, year on year. And you could even compare the amount of engagement that you get with an engagement survey to see how people are doing with it. But a big part when you're asking for feedback is going to be that company culture. Do people feel like they can be honest with you about their own interpretation of how the organization is doing in terms of inclusivity or whatever else, without the fear of getting any negative pushback on them? Obviously, I think it's important with these engagement surveys to make them confidential, but sometimes in some organizations that might not even be enough. I know that I've worked with some organizations in the past where they say things are confidential and the employees are still a little bit like, are you sure? Like, what if they're not? And they kind of have to make it really clear that it is. And that might even be like doing a webinar and being like, look, when you input this information, I can't see this data and stuff like that. So just kind of just trying to really focus on your culture. And you've got to think, if you don't feel that your employees can be honest with you, that's kind of a big red flag there that you need to make some internal change. So moving on from those, we can have accessibility and accommodation tracking. So this is looking at what tailored accommodations you offer. Do people know about it if you go around and ask them, or is it just in some random policy online that nobody knows where it is? Is it used? If so, by how many? And does this make a difference? Can you see that, you've brought in this software, and since you've brought in this software, that maybe it's Dragon and it's a text-to-speech software, and people can now talk their emails while they're walking instead of having to type them down, and then everything's moving much faster. Can you track that? Okay, I've brought this system in, I've brought this process in, and because of this, people are sending out X many emails to this, people are calling this many people, we're getting this amount of profit, all of this kind of thing, trying to work out, is it used, by how many, and what difference does it make? And then you can also kind of track, are you offering the right things? So if you've got a long list of accommodations that you've got, but then they are being used, but they're not being used, or they are being used, but they're actually not making much of a difference, then you kind of got to ask yourself, am I even offering the right things? Like, is this software that I paid X, Y, and Z for, that's not making a difference, really what I need? Or do I actually just need to train my managers on how to communicate better with their employees so that people feel more comfortable in raising issues or whatever it is? Because I feel like a lot of the time people try to sell you really expensive softwares and stuff when the answer could be really simply just changing some perspectives and changing some ways of working, but like in a really simple way, just in terms of, I'm gonna message this person instead of call them right away. I'm gonna put bullet points in this email instead of sending them all of my brain just spread out on an email that doesn't make any sense. Um, so then we can also look at turnover and retention statistics. If you can track your demographics of leavers, great. If you can do exit interviews, even better. Just gathering the data and seeing why are people leaving, who is leaving, and is there any trends there that warrant anything to be looked at? And then again, I'm going to touch on performance metrics. I kind of said it a little bit earlier, but are we using the right ones? Do they account for such things such as varied communication styles, problem-solving approaches, creative thinking? Are people's skills being utilized at all? You might realize that when you have some performance reviews or when you're kind of tracking these things, that people have skills that you're not even utilizing in their role, and this might mean that you have to do a rescope for their role. You might even realize that somebody's role is the wrong role for them, and that they would actually do a hell of a lot better in operations over sales because of the way that their brain works. So things like this will stop you from having employees leave because they're not thriving in a role, to instead you can actually just reposition them and then they might be happier than they've ever been. And then you also have just general diversity metrics for demographics, culture, and inclusiveness and things like that. So yeah, that's just a quick touch on our tracking metrics. There's a lot more that you can use. But yeah, I'm going to hand back over to Neil for our last topic of curiosity and tolerance.
Yeah, so I'm aware that we've been talking for a long time. So I was going to talk about these two things as maybe a chance to do an interactive exercise. You can stay off camera to do that. You don't need to talk either. But I wonder if I can just have potentially a little show of hands for doing something that's experiential on this that you could try out as we're on the call. If you're up for that, can you show a thumb? And if you don't want to, of course, that's also all right. Just see if there's any response to that. Okay, so we've got one person saying yes. Anybody else? It's fine if you don't. I know what, but two? Okay. It's cheating. Anybody else? Okay. Justin, I will be happy if you stay on the call afterwards to kind of do that. So where I'm going to go with this, I'm taking myself off the screen that's got the PowerPoint on, just so I can see all these lovely windows with people. So this is where I'm going to go with this. So curiosity, being curious about around us, being curious about their life experiences and where they're at, that is a huge, excellent feeder for making a very inclusive and productive, thriving neurodiverse workspace. And I can't really think of a better way to do it. Forget about sets of rules, forget about etiquette or plans, than actually some good old-fashioned, in inverted commas, meditation. By that, I don't mean you need to get a yoga mat out and you need to go the whole hog. I do practice meditation in a major way, but I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about, in the case of curiosity, just being in the moment, And you can encourage the brain to be in the moment by just anchoring to something around you and letting go of other thoughts. So the worries about the future, the past, what you're doing for the next, you've got full back-to-back meetings, letting all that stuff go. So for me, it's holding on to my breath. Literally just taking a minute to slow myself down. I'm doing it right now as I talk. And just letting go of the breath, just bringing things right down. So then the person who's in front of me, I'm much more aware of. And then if I can remind myself that they're a person underneath that job title as well, my interaction with them is going to be a lot more connected and fruitful. So that curiosity lies in being alive in the moment thing. So that will be my, what some might think is strange advice for that one. And tolerance, Maggie and I have talked about this. So by tolerance, we don't mean putting up with different groups of people. Traditionally has been a word that's used, that people who've been in EDI spaces for decades will know. The word tolerance was used before acceptance, both of them horrible words, before we got to kind of equality. We don't mean that. What we mean is that there are a number of times during the day, every day, people aren't coping and their reactions might be quite aggressive or defensive or confused about what to do next when it can seem really clear to us. And just allowing ourselves to remember that everybody is struggling right now. I don't mean allowing abusive at all. And heaven knows there needs to be some boundaries around the way that people talk to each other, generally, for sure. But just allowing that can be really helpful. And for that, little meditation piece, again, and that is coming back to the kindness that we talked about before, 3 sentences. Again, you can put yourself either in the breath or just focusing on something that helps you let go of everything. And may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be free from worry is one way to kind of get into that and to wish that for ourselves or for the people around us. May you be happy, we be happy. May you be healthy, we be healthy. May you be free from worry, may we be free from worry. I'm not suggesting you go around the office and say that to everybody that you meet. That can be in your head, it could be in the toilet. I know some people I coach go in the toilet and just spend 2 minutes after feeling like they want to go on a killing spree and just bring it down and reconnect with compassion that way. But just a few little ideas.
I feel nice and calm now, Neil. So thank you for that.
Could you feel me decompress when I did that?
I could feel it. I could feel it, and I felt it in my brain. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
End of the webinar now. Getting to the end. Thank you. So that is the end of our, I guess, information that we're gonna talk to you about. I'm going to touch a little bit on, I guess, that kind of follow-ups that we can offer about the next 5 minutes. And then if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to jump on and shout it out or put it in the chat. Up to you. So I just want to talk a little bit about our company culture audit and kind of what it is that we're offering from this webinar for free. Obviously, I don't know if anyone's seen the email, but you kind of get free access to our neuroculture quiz, which is just quick 20 questions that you can fill in that ask you questions about kind of what processes and policies you have, kind of views and culture within the organization. And then from that, we will send you over a really comprehensive document which will say what you're doing well, what you're not doing so well, / what you can improve on, and then some actionable steps that you can run away and implement as you wish. So that is actually part of our full company audit, which has, as I said, the neuroculture quiz. We do a HR audit, do a little holistic company assessment, depending on the size of the organization. We'll take a bit of a sample pool and ask them some questions to try and see, you know, how they view the organization. It's quite hard sometimes, I think, especially if you're at that top level, to really get a good feel of how the culture is, because you might be like, oh, I've got these policies, I've got this process, I've got these practices, we're super inclusive. But then when you ask kind of lower down the food chain, that might not be reciprocated. So it really allows you to understand kind of where you think you are and where you actually are, and then try and bridge that gap and hopefully bring it all forward. So kind of from that, we kind of do a review meeting with HR, SLT, whoever it is, and present our findings, and then do kind of like give some recommendations. So that might be HR policy or processes, some operational training and changes, some coaching, training, anything like that. And then you're able to take that and run and roll it out yourself. We can kind of make these recommendations for you, or we can kind of do a bit of a dual approach where we can coach / mentor people who are going to be making that change through the process themselves. So yeah, that's all the sales I'm going to do. That's it for the end of that. I hope you guys enjoyed the webinar. If anybody has any questions, they're welcome to jump in now. If not, then you're all welcome to finish your day and have a lovely evening. Oh, I've got a Jenny. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for staying for the hour. We appreciate it. Ooh,
yes, Justin.
Go on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for today. I was just curious, Maggie, you just touched in the second last agenda item there about, I think it was repositioning employees into roles that they would excel and thrive.
Yeah.
So I'm a volunteer for a disability network at where I work, and it's civil service law enforcement. And there's this whole situation around square pegs, round holes, and placement, I think is the word, is trying to get these neurodiverse individuals into a position or a place or a role where they're going to excel, because currently people are just sort of doing the best they can. People have just come to the realization in their mature age that they are diverse and that they shouldn't have to force themselves to do reading and writing and report writing when they have dyslexia and things like that. It's what do we do when the roles are quite sort of cut and dry, black and white? They are inflexible. But how can we reinvent ourselves? How can the when the roles don't exist, when you have that, we have a skill. We would love to have a skills matrix of those who are bringing neurodiverse strengths. But how do we then allocate those individuals? How do we then what's the word? It's you said that, I think you said the word scoping for the position, or can you rescope or something like that. So it's just very difficult to move people around and reallocate when the jobs aren't that flexible. The individuals can be, but obviously we want productivity to be maximized, and sadly it's just a bit, some of these roles are counterproductive. So it's, what do we do when we want to try and get the best out of the officers and put them in the right place when those places don't exist?
Yeah, that is a tough one, because obviously you want to be flexible and you want to offer the opportunities, but not all organizations can. You might be a small organization that only has a certain amount of roles. You might have, as it seems like you have specific roles that need to fulfill a specific purpose, and that has to be quite a linear way of working. So you don't really have the flexibility in the operational changes or in the kind of repositioning side. So when that is the case, I think it's really focusing on that communication, workplace environments, and the tailored accommodations that you can offer. So if you're able to support, if it's kind of, as you said, it sounds like a lot of reading and writing and things like this, like, can you kind of fork out that extra budget for maybe Grammarly or Dragon software or things like that? Or can you kind of partner up individuals with maybe a mentor that they can work with that can help them maybe just proofread an email or proofread some work, or kind of they can have that kind of discussion with each other that will allow them to kind of bounce ideas off, so that even though they might be in a position that's quite that the job roles are quite specific, they're able to be quite flexible in how they do that and kind of use these external supports to make it easier for them. Maybe coaching would also be a good way that they can kind of learn more about themselves and learn more about how they can not overcome their issues, because they're never going to be able to overcome them, but they might be able to learn new ways of working within this regimented system that they're in, that will allow them to be able to work easier, work faster, and work in something that's not particularly easy for them. For example, like, I'm in HR and I'm dyslexic. I do contracts, I do policy writing, I do so much reading that it's really like when I started, I remember thinking, what have I done? This is so contradictory to the way that my brain works, but it's learning how you can actually make processes easier for yourself. So like for me, any single thing that I create, say if I need to do a contract or I need to do a letter, like I've created templates for everything. If I do something once, I create a template for it so that it's then in my folder so that I can, and then like I'll have all the personal information out and I'll put highlighting where it is so that when this comes round again, I'm not sat there thinking, oh, now I need to write this contract or now I need to write this policy. I've got templates that I can pull from, maybe change, alter, whatever it is, so that it makes things a lot easier for me and that I'm not there having to be like, okay, I need to now look at this piece of information, this piece of text from A to Z. I only need to look at those small little things that I've changed. So it's kind of just working with individuals when you can't rescope or whatever it is. It's working with the individuals to find ways for them that's going to make working easier. Neil, have you got anything to add for that?
Just a couple of extra things, unless just you've had your fill, but I'm more than happy to kind of add. Thinking about this I'm thinking about this from third sector or public sector point of view, where I think particularly there are an incredible number of very rigid systems in place, presumably because people are worried if they don't have a rigid organisational structure, it's going to get swept away but by the next flood of cuts. But I think there's a couple of things that people can do. First of all, if allowing for that creativity to open and having a mindset, Maggie was saying, about how you pull a bit from here or a bit from there or somebody from somewhere else to kind of help out, I think that can be really, really powerful. Particularly if there's outside agencies that can be called on, that can support particular people for particular needs. But also I was thinking about something that happened when I was a teacher, where I went to teach that a billion report a year, maybe not a billion, but and they're all on this little grid computer thing. And I went to a senior leader, and I said, would you ask a dyscalculic young people to fill in something like this? Would you expect them to be able to do it? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, for me, it takes 3 times as long because I can't read grids and I can't read numbers. And she said, yes, but you're not a child. You've got the skills for that. And that was the end of the conversation. So I think they can do a lot better than that. So people, if the environment is psychologically safe, people will come and say, do you know what? This is what I'm struggling with. I really need it. Can you recommend somebody? And then if there's a more open environment of people helping each other and an unsiloed approach to it, because I think that's the other thing that can happen very easily in kind of involuntary environments and public sector, then people can really, really kind of help each other out a little more. But yes, lack of resource and rigid systems are very, very difficult ways to get around. So I hope something in that's been slightly helpful. But
yes, thank you both.
Amazing. Any more questions for any more before we end?
Any meditators? Anybody want to meditate?